Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by Creator IQ. Here's Conor Begley.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earn. Today, I've got Akash Mehta on the show today. Welcome to the show, Akash.
Thank you so much for having me, Conor.
Yeah, and Akash has come all the way from the UK, and we're recording at KLW Studios, which is a public radio studios, first in-person podcast in like 2 years, 3 years.
I'm honored. Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
And I think my favorite part, what I just noticed, is your shirt actually says Tiger Tribe. I don't know if that was an accident, but...
That actually... I'll be honest. No, I'm going to lie. It was not an accident. It was very much planned. Tribe Dynamics all the way.
I remember one of our first big meetings, we walked into Makeup Forever, and they had Tribe on their bulletin board, right? Yeah. I assumed they had done it for us. I was like, oh my God, they did this for us. And I was like, no, that's just what they called their people.
Yeah.
So, Akash, let me brag about you for a second here. Initially, how we got to know each other was you were leading the influencer program at Dior, took that into being a top 5 brand globally within that category from an influencer perspective. Now I think it's in the top 2. You then went on and co-founded Fable Mane, which went from our 96th ranked brand past 37 brands all the way up to 59 this year and is growing rapidly from a revenue perspective as well. And then you also have your own podcast, Founded Beauty, which is in the top 2.5% of all podcasts globally, which you haven't invited me to yet, but I'm not going to take personally. I'm assuming I'll eventually get there.
It's coming, for sure.
Although I didn't technically found a beauty brand, so maybe it doesn't make
no, but it counts. It counts. You have done.
So let's hop into it. So I want to start with, you were just telling me that you were at the Sephora marketing meetings yesterday. So what's the latest with Sephora? You were talking influencers. What are the big ambitions for the brand for the year?
Yeah, so I think for us, definitely what we're seeing as a trend recently is the brick and mortar business is growing, but that is coming quite interestingly at a cost where I think brands are sort of neglecting online a little bit, especially driving sort of like online media to Sephora. So I think one thing we took away as a big takeaway is we got to make sure we're investing sufficient amounts into, of course, social. So our EMV strategy is crucial, I think, going forward, but also media as well to .com. So that was a really big, interesting takeaway. I think like post-pandemic, while online was so big, with the rise of brick and mortar back to business, you have to find that 50-50 sort of balance. And that's what we need to take back from this market is like, okay, are we, doing enough online now to balance that kind of mix a bit better? So that was one big takeaway. It's quite interesting. I definitely see a correlation with brands performing really well on EMV and how much they got mentioned in the Sephora Summit. It's so funny that you're mentioning about like Rare and stuff. Definitely like the ones that are driving good traffic to Sephora and of course their brands and getting the revenues. I think there's a huge correlation with their EMV ranking. So I think one thing that we're looking into and with Fable now is looking to get a tribe account, right? Is just to really start measuring that sort of media spend we're doing with an ROI of the EMV. So that will help us, I think, understand better, are we actually investing in this to get the online split better?
Well, the good part is your problem was not marketing, right? The brand was going really fast. Your problem was like inventory.
That is a reality. And I think like there is 3 things we did, which I would say are like opportunities that we need to like expand more into and just get a bit more deeper in. Like one is definitely like our inventory. The fact that yes, it's great we're selling out, but why are we selling out so quickly versus our replenishment rate? So there is definitely a big work in hiring and a more stronger operational logistics team, which we've done finally this year. And, that takes time to afford these incredible hires. So we finally have a team there. I think 2 as well is do that volume to get the labs like really interested in you. So make sure you're on their primary list of like, okay, you want a last minute run of production? We got you. Not, sorry, you have to wait till 6 months because there's so many brands ahead of you. So I think that inventory is one big thing. But I also think what's really important for us is just while we went quite global with Fable Mane, so we're in a lot of retailers around the world, I think it's about now taking a moment to pause and be proud of what our expansion is, but now be more productive in those markets. That is a key takeaway for us as well, is how do I make the business perform better and not just our hero SKU, but make the other SKUs have its moment as well. Reason why I'm full of ideas and I'm going straight to the point in this podcast is because I literally had a Sephora Summit, which is, for everyone listening, it's like 2 days of presentations. You have leadership presentations, global presentations. You have these sort of breakout sessions per category. So hair, makeup, fragrance, skin. Obviously, you hear a lot of talk from founders and what they're doing. And then you go back to your teams and like, we should be doing this. And then literally 3 days later, I had my market meeting. And the market meeting is usually twice a year. And this is where about 20 people come into the room, from the VPs to all the divisions, so .com, marketing, merchandising, digital. And they present the revenue, the sales, and some opportunities. And then you present for about an hour your plan, what you're kind of planning from product to media. And I just finished that literally 2 hours ago. So
Oh, wow.
full of ideas right now.
I can imagine. Yeah, let's dive into that kind of symbiotic relationship because I think retail in general is an interesting topic because one, from what I'm hearing, everybody's rushing back to retail, right? So retail sales are going through the roof. Everybody's doing really well. I think when you think about Sephora very specifically, you've got two things going on, right? So one is if you look at the top influencers, like the top people providing coverage for Sephora, it's the brands. Like Rare Beauty is the number one influencer for Sephora, as an example. But then secondarily, I think Sephora has also built its own reputation as a brand builder. And we looked at this as well, where if you look at the amount of EMV that Sephora is generating for its brands, it's like double what, say, Ulta is, right? And Ulta is ahead of the other retailers. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that relationship. Obviously, it's been really critical to your guys' success.
Definitely.
But yeah, talk to me about that a little bit.
You know, we're in quite a few retailers globally, right? So from Selfridges and Boots in the UK to pure players like Cult Beauty. And we're also in like Douglas and Nika. So we've been in a lot of different retailers. And I can tell you nothing really matches the sort of relationship and the way of working we are with Sephora. And it's because exactly to your point, like Sephora is an influencer. They are an EMV driver. I think most retailers don't operate in that way. Either they don't have like an audience, like, you know, Sephora has like 20 million followers plus great engagement, right? Most retailers might not have that reach, but also might not provide it for the brands. It might be a pay to play, right? And that often is the case we've seen with most retailers out there. So I think going to understand the difference between one is a brand builder and one is a distributor. So for us, Sephora is, of course, is distributing our products, but they're really brand building in tandem with that, which means your investment into Sephora definitely amplifies your revenue growth because of that kind of marrying of the fact that they are also brand building you at the same time. So what we've definitely seen is you're seeing this big shift on how brands are starting to launch in Sephora. It can be daunting. You know, you have to make sure you sort of have this recipe for success before you go into it. So sometimes you might even not launch there tactically because you might not be ready for it, right? You don't want to miss up these opportunities that they'll be giving to you. And often they'll give you these incredible brand building opportunities that have no cost to you except maybe some hard costs like the sampling costs that you got to suffer and pay for, or your team's cost and having the bandwidth for that. So I think I recommend everyone who's got like that holy grail mecca of retailers to go to Sephora. I think it's phenomenal, but I think you must be ready for this journey ahead. And you don't have to sprint before you walk. I think that's really important. Like there's different ways to launch in the smart way. You can launch online only, prove yourself, earn your respect, earn your stripes, and then go into brick and mortar. You can launch on your D2C for a few years and then build some revenue, some customer base, and then go to Sephora. One tip is don't go too distributed because I think once you go to the doors like Ulta and a few other retailers, you become less enticing to a brand builder like Sephora because they really do value the exclusivity of brands. But I can tell you, having done a lot of different retailers, nothing is like Sephora. Like that is where our biggest growth for the business is. It's why our brand is where it is today. And I think that's why we've even extended our exclusivity, right? We're extending it beyond our need just because we want to still be not only winning with them, but also there's so much more to do that I don't want to dilute my time or budget for other retailers.
Yeah, 100%. We had Ken Landis on the podcast recently, who's the co-founder at Bobbi Brown, then co-founder at Tula, which sold for a ton of money, and then co-founder at Dibs, which is growing really, really quickly. And he was a huge advocate. It was his number one piece of advice was he called it narrow but deep. And it's not all that different than if there's a guy named Frank Slootman, who's like one of the best software entrepreneurs in the world, very similar, just increased focus, right? Increased impact. And the thing he talked about is he's like, my favorite thing to do is to tell retailers no. And he's like, and I wouldn't go into a new retailer until I was the number one SKU in every door in that retailer. Like that was our goal, was to be the best performing brand within that category in a retailer before we'd even consider new distribution. And that was one of the biggest mistakes was people went too distributed too fast.
Exactly. And you know, that's something that I think you have to understand what your goal is. I think for most businesses today, there are some brands that are going for that distribution quite quick. And if their goal is to exit in a few years or get a majority or minority acquisition and get that revenue higher, like who's to say that's not a bad strategy, right? That's a tactic that can get the balance sheet a bit stronger. And now, yes, there are some acquirers or conglomerates that will look at that. And if it's not done smartly, it could actually be more dangerous because it means like they've got to undo the work or you've actually done it in the wrong way, that distribution. But generally speaking, you often see this trend of that. I think for new founders anyway, let's be honest, we're not looking to exit anytime soon. We're building a brand and we don't know where the brand will take us. It's a journey. So I think for the majority of the listeners that are probably in this boat, I think my biggest advice is balance and the opportunity cost. There is worth in every decision you do there is merit and there is cons. For sure, like I'm now seeing 3-4 years into the business that, okay, like maybe we went quite global, not regretting it, because I can tell you the amount of founders that I've spoken to, they're like, oh my God, like I'm trying to get into Sephora Middle East and you're already in there. And, you know, there's only limited haircare space and brick and mortar and you've taken it and they're loyal to you. So I can't launch in store. If I listened to people, like I had merchants at the beginning of my journey saying, don't go to global, just focus on US. These brands take 5-6 years before they break US, then they go global. I went year one global. I didn't really listen. Bearing in mind, I'm based in London, in the UK. You know, it's a bit different. I'm not a US native.
It's a global,
you know, head office or brand. I was a little bit more global. My dad, which is another story, you know, he's in distribution globally for fragrance brands. I've got this global mindset. Yeah, definitely. I will say, I'm going to be honest. Like, I am seeing some struggles today where if we're not productive in these retails in like Sephora Middle East, you will get delisted or you'll lose space. So you got to make sure you can upstand that demand and that hope that those markets put on you. But it's really interesting. One thing I'm noticing is in certain retailers like Sephora, how globalized they're becoming. You know, at the beginning of my journey, it was very like isolated units, like by country and by market. Now they've invested in building a global head office team, which I think is going to really pioneer this global vision. I'm really excited for it because I think that's going to strengthen our decision. And we did tactically decide to go to mainly Sephora's globally.
Yep.
Not saying, you know, every Sephora is the best in each market. And I think that's something where there is a bit of a struggle. Like some retailers want you to be like one glove fits all. And I think, again, balance. I have to sometimes say like, yeah, listen, I know I would love to launch in 18 markets in Sephora, but there are some markets where there is a bigger player.
Yeah.
And my brand might need to be there first. You know, that's a reality too.
Yeah, totally. One question I have, you talked about you want to be productive in those markets. And obviously you've been, you know, you started out, you were successful within, we'll call it the primary English-speaking market, so UK, US. How do you go about building demand in, say, the Middle East or wherever, you know, whatever country it is?
I think there's loads of different ways, and that's the beauty of it. It shouldn't be as daunting as people think. Number one, you can distribute into these markets directly now. Like the barriers to entry to distribute have changed hugely. Before there was mainly like certain like retailers wouldn't take on small accounts. It was too much of a risk and a big bet. They would rather big accounts only go direct, the rest are distributed. And then you'd have to go via someone that might not, A, take a margin, makes it really expensive, and B, might not brand build in the right way, right? You might discount, might go to some retailers you're not interested in. So that's why people have often been scared about global distribution. But I'm talking like selective strategic global expansion, right? So for me, I realized by exploring these avenues a bit openly, like bearing in mind, my dad is a distributor, so he goes to like hundreds of retailers. So I didn't utilize his brand book in building Fable. I kind of went in open-minded naivety, like let's see what the market's like. And I was surprised that all these retailers like Sephora Middle East, Nykaa in India, they were willing to go direct with us. I didn't have to use a distributor. That was really crucial because they are literally like, I mean, it's so funny. You have these stories of Sephora Middle East where they're even like getting visas for employees. Like they are literally so involved with your brand that they will help you, right? They will help you in how to market best and listen to them because they have the know-how of that market.
Yep.
And that has been crucial for us because they've helped us with PR. You know, they've helped us with the right influencers locally to advocate your brand in the local language if relevant, right? They've helped us with translation if needed. We send them the master doc and then they translate it for all the product pages. So I think it's as if you were launching in your key market, just utilizing a strong brand builder. So often it can be a retailer. It could be a distributor. Don't get me wrong. There are some amazing distributors that are very niche and boutique and they can do that really well for you. Or you could hire like local part-time help or field staff or help, you know, like maybe like a consultant. We've done that initially at launch into these markets. We've hired like consultants for 6-month projects to help us launch with a select retailer. And that's been really helpful. And they know the market and the relationships. They have the relationships with everyone locally, which I think is so crucial. So in India, when we launched, we did like our couple of months targets in the first month in Nykaa. We smashed our targets. And so for Middle East, we had like this huge Dubai Mall window and we're now doing really well. We're really productive. So I think those are strategies we've really relied on going in, not knowing and listening more than telling. I think that's been really crucial.
Talk about India for a second because I was just talking with Felix, the CEO of Pixie Beauty.
I met him in the wedding of Nykaa, Anchit. So he's in Nykaa as well. And we both were partying at this wedding in Rajasthan. So it's crazy.
He likes to party. But he was talking to me about India. And I think Mac brought it up recently, Mac Cosmetics, and I was talking to them. They're like, yeah, India's growing super, super fast. Is that what you're seeing? Is it like of scale? Talk to me about it a little bit.
100%. I think people know India has a huge opportunity. I think people don't know where to start. I mean, like the amount of people that come to me and like, hey, and I'm like, hi, and they're like, I have a question. I'm like, I bet it's about India, and it's just because I'm Indian. And to be fair, like I do know a thing or two about the Indian market, but generally speaking, like, you know, I'm not the most adverse into it. So my experience with it is, I read an article like I don't want to quote where it's from, but it said Indians, like South Asians, had the highest purchasing power, even more than Chinese people.
Oh, wow.
And this was really interesting. And it kind of reflects what I know, right? My aunties and my mum's friends, they spend a lot of money. So I knew there is a community, and these are in India, right? That really buy. Initially, for a brand like ours, we have this stigmatism that retail in India is price discount, it's promotional, and this is how it is. And the retailer landscape is a little bit like mix of masstige and prestige. So you go to a store like Nykaa and you'd see like a $5 product next to a Dior cream. And that was very common India trend, and it still is. But we were nervous, like, okay, as an Ayurvedic brand that's more in the premium haircare sector, is it going to resonate when India is a land of Ayurveda, right? And people can just get the organic ingredients as they've been growing up with for centuries. But actually, we were so shocked that there was a modern consumer that wants our products, that is obsessed with Sephora in the US, for example, wants the newest, and is willing to invest. And I think some pioneering brands like Charlotte Tilbury and MAC, for example, have really built that kind of affinity for westernized beauty brands into the market. And there is a sense of loyalty, a bit of like maybe efficacy that people have perceived to be higher by these products, and a bit of desirability, right? These brands are a bit more sexier, exciting for the modern Indian consumer to spend their money on and invest in. So we have found ourselves positioning ourselves into this realm of people. And because the population in India is so big, even if this is like a very subsection of the population,
very small percentage,
it's still huge. So definitely India has been huge growth opportunities. I think it's only going to get bigger. I think that's the exciting part. So I think brands that want to bet on a very sustainable future, go direct with India. I get frustrated a little bit. Like when I worked at Dior and all these markets and these companies, Estée Lauder, often India is worked into Middle East, right? Coming out of this region, or even Singapore or Hong Kong as Southeast Asia. Never do they have a direct relationship into India, and never do they have a team within India. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity. I think India deserves its merit as a standalone country because the size is huge, the potential is huge, and it needs nurturement. It needs a specific type of marketing tactic and merchandising tactic. We do need to do...
well, and frankly, even within India, we kind of group it all together, but it's a huge, diverse set of cultures, even as you split that, right?
Exactly.
Like as you start splitting it up.
And in areas, and obviously the country is huge. And I think one thing I noticed, which was really interesting in India, is we don't do the best job to understand those different, as you said, ethnicities, different languages. The most like 100 plus languages are spoken in India. So you can't operate it from Singapore or Dubai. You have to have local team. And that frustrates me a bit to this day. And I think hopefully that will shift in the future by brands.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about influencer marketing for a second. So I think you're one of the best influencer marketers in the world. So I think you know.
I used to be. I changed so much. Honestly, Conor, like I speak to my team and I'm like, so who's trending now? What is new? What is that? Like, but you know what? It's good to pass the baton because I don't have necessarily like the full energy to, like, it's a full-time thing. And being a CEO, I came into this company thinking I'm going to lead it by influence strategy because that's what I knew from Dior and Estée Lauder. But I'm really glad I'm hiring like amazing like Gen Zs that are just so into the know-how of these new talents, the rising talents. Yeah, that's what you want to bet on, right?
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I've been in it for a very long time, and I don't think there was ever a time where I felt like confident. There was always a new name, like, I have no idea who that is, right? And they have 10 million fans. But let's talk a little bit about what were some of the learnings you had in that space within Dior, and then how have you seen that change? And what do you think, if you were to boil it down to a few core philosophies, what are those?
So it was really interesting. I think the best thing Dior gave to me, and I think people work in corporate and then go to create their own brand, is the relationships I had with these influencers. They follow me on Instagram. I've bonded with them on work trips, influencer trips. So I can sort of like DM them, say, hey, got this new launch of my brand. Can I send it to you? And then they'll often post because they're loyal and they're going to support you. Not everyone, but some. I mean, it makes sense. They might have like contracts and like exclusivities and stuff. So I get it. I'm not expecting them to. And the most thing is I hope they just use it and don't throw it away. But can't guarantee that. What I really noticed is, and I think this is a trend with many influencer marketers, is you have to sort of unlearn each time and refresh and reboot, because what I knew at Dior worked really well for Dior. And let's be honest, like it's Dior. It's got the brand equity and recognition. Two, you had the budget. And while I was coming in there to like streamline it up, whip it up, get some ROI, make this a less gray area, if we spent on an influencer 20K and it didn't work, we're not going to like cry about it. We move on. Whereas for me, I'm like 20K, oh my God, that's a big budget. So I think that was the hardest part. And I think the third thing as well, which I had to sort of unlearn, is we were still very, very heavily depending on these like celebrities and VIPs, right? I was going in there trying to build a nano micro influencer, but it wasn't brand building enough. It was this like campaigns, it was like one-off moments, but it was like, okay, tick. Whereas the nurturement was really only with the top tier, right? There's the ones that get invited to all the events and all the runways and fashion shows and everything. So creating my own brand, I realized a lot of that isn't really applicable for most beauty startups and even like mid-sized companies and even
most brands are Dior.
Brands.
Yeah.
Most brands are Dior. And I think Dior is even not Dior. Like even Dior is probably like really doubling down on this now more than ever, because what you're seeing is there is a huge trend on the top influencers, the macros and the VIPs. They have agents. I call this influencer fee inflation. Like their fee has gone up, but maybe their value hasn't increased, or like their ROI definitely might not be there, but they might not be gaining that kind of initial engagement and reach that they had before. And especially in platforms like TikTok, it's so the case, because you look at the last 10 pieces of content and they might have not been performing that well for that influencer. But also it depends on many things. In the influencer's case, in their defense, it depends on the product. It depends on that piece of content, the transparency they have to be authentic with it, the brief they have. You know, there's a lot of factors that are involved. So it's not as simple as me saying that. But in a generalization, it's getting very expensive. And I can tell you, like, when I speak to half of these agents, because you're paying their 20% fee, some of these quotes I'm getting, it's just not viable. 70K for a post and 100K. It's like, that's
I heard 180K the other day.
It's really like, it's hard because you're still betting on this. And then to make it even work better, you want to get media rights and then boost it. That's another budget. So, you know, you're investing like a whole campaign from one shot of one influencer. You know, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And then the micros and the nanos, while they're so crucial, there's a lot of them. But again, you want to bet on the ones that are rising. It's still expensive because I think now every brand is working with nano and micro influencers, and they also get agents. The amount of nano influencers that have agents now, I'm like, what? So it's crazy. It's shifted so much to like 5 years ago. And
yeah.
I think for brands today, there is a lot of choice of amazing content creators to work with, but there is also a little bit of this unknown factor that still remains, this gray area. I own today still Dior's affiliate program. So I have all the data. I see all of the conversion of these influencers that Dior works with, because I built it when I was at Dior. When I left Dior, they made me continue it. I don't even use it. I think for brands listening, like, don't go ask your friends or your founder friends for a list of amazing converting influencers, and don't just find them yourself organically. Now, my biggest advice by doing this is 3 ways. One is monitor your own socials. If you're seeing a little uprise organically, or someone posting that you even paid and you're seeing that sticks, get on a Zoom call with them, nurture that relationship, try to lock them in for a 12-month, which they would prefer, like a longer term partnership. I don't really believe in exclusivity. I think at our stage, like, you don't need to like say you can only work with us. Like, I think they need to talk with multiple hair brands and multiple brands. But a longer term brand building contract is crucial on those. 2, don't be afraid of different verticals. Like, we've seen the biggest success with TikTokers and Instagrammers that are not traditional beauty influencers. And that's been really powerful for us. I think our biggest sale drivers have been actually not beauty ones.
Interesting.
So that's been really crucial. And I think the third thing for me is, don't also think about just using the landscape of content creators out there. Maybe build your own content creators within your team or yourself as a founder. So one of my friends who I'm an investor in, Dirty, which is a mushroom tea coffee company, their channel, like their Dirty TikTok account, gets millions of views in most videos as them, as the founders, being the influencer.
Yep.
They don't spark it, but you could spark your own content. But maybe you build yourself as an influencer. It's cheaper.
Which you've kind of done, right? To a certain
kind of
extent.
done. I think the hard thing for me is it's hard because as a CEO, there's a lot of hats I have in the day. Like, the last thing I can think about is going in front of a camera sometimes when there's like flames to extinguish and meetings to do. So it is hard. Like, I do think I need to get better at making a setup that's conducive to me to film better. Like, it's there in front of me, and maybe like a day or 2 a month where there's a content day. So I'm working on that this year because I think it's important. I also need to rally out my sister in this because she is a co-founder and we have the story together. And in hair, let's be honest, like, I don't have a lot of hair. Like, I think it's really compelling to like see my sister's videos and my videos, but she does not want to do any of that. So I think it's also finding these ambassadors, like content creators that are semi-employees, but like on retainer review. They're really, and then you repost them, and they even create content for you that you don't even tell them to post on their channels.
Yeah.
That has been really interesting for us, I think. And then you show diversity of hair types, or for us, textures. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the podcast side of things. So I think that's something that's really interesting. You started, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, and you're now, again, top 2.5% in the globe, might be even higher than that, kind of more recently. Hundreds of episodes, I think, at this point,
Yeah,
right?
we're nearly 175 soon.
Yeah. So talk about one, why did you do it? And then two, what has been the impact for you, right? What have been some of the positive things, maybe things you didn't expect too, that have come out of it?
So I think the why, there was two main reasons. The first is in launching Fable, starting the journey, leaving that corporate bubble where I was in Estee Lauder, Burberry, Dior, in these companies. I felt really vulnerable to, you built your name in these companies by what people think, and that's how you get promoted and that's how you grow. To be like your own, where at the end of the day, like the only thing that really matters is what you think of yourself. It's quite lonely starting this journey and not having anyone who really gets it. Even your employees, they get it, but they don't feel the burn when it goes down as much as you do. They don't feel the stress, that decision making as much as you do. But I realized like the people that could feel the most like me at that stage are their founders. And I often had this feeling, and many years ago it was even more the case than today, where there was this competition, or especially if it's in the same category or same retailer, it's like, don't tell them what you're doing. And I didn't feel that was really exciting for the future of this industry, that I felt needs to come together more to make it more fun, more enjoyable, make better change. But what I found was so pleasantly surprised. The minute I launched, obviously Sephora does like emails and you get all these like moments. I had a lot of founders reach out, but the one that really stood out for me was Sarah Lee from Glow Recipe. So she DM'd me, and she's one of my dearest friends today. And she was like, I would love to get on a Zoom. Huge fan of what you built in your brand. Love everything about it. Let's catch up. So I had a Zoom with her, Christine, me, I think my sister joined. And the first question, I was like, I'm a huge fan of your brand, but like, tell me about your story. And I heard her story and I was like, oh my God, like it was so inspiring. I want my team to listen to it. I want everyone to listen to it. And then it also got me thinking, as someone who was in charge of influencers at Dior, and building a lot of these content creators, where some of them, I didn't want them to be like the biggest in the industry, because you can tell their incentives are not really right.
Yeah.
I was a bit frustrated. Like, people like Hila Yang, still doesn't know, like, why does no one not know her name? And she's like how many followers she has now? And she doesn't have thousands of followers.
Yeah.
The brand does millions. And if she wants to, why can't she have 1 million? Like, these are amazing people.
Well, and this company got acquired for $500 million too,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, why can't more people hear their story and learn from these amazing experts and founders and storytellers? So I thought, let's create a place where I could basically, like at that time it was the pandemic, where I could just like go on these Zooms equivalent, right? With all these different founders, press record, do the same thing I did with Sarah, just hear a story. I will just make that space, founder to founder. And eventually that was a podcast. I didn't realize it. I was like, okay, this is a podcast. Let's call it Founder Duty. And then once you had a few of them introduced to others. And then I was like, okay, I started going from 1 a week to 2 a week, because I just had a waiting list of founders I wanted to come on. And as my ego, I was like, I want to get to know as many founders. This is not only is an amazing networking tool, it's a good friendship builder. And yeah, I can maybe do more collaboration. So it went from a podcast really quickly to like also more than that, a community. I have a saying, more collaboration, less competition. And we really do that into real world stuff. So we've had multiple breakfast, lunches and dinners. We did this BYOB concept, so bring your own brand. And I get founders in I've done it in LA, New York, London. We do collaborations. I did one with British Beauty Council where we invited 200 people at the end of year reception drinks. I've done painting class. I just did a workout before Sephora Summit. So wherever I will see founders in an area, send them a message. If they're down, they're down. If it's 5 people, 10 people, 100 people, let's just get together and collaborate. And I can tell you, I've seen so many people I've put together that they have now done stuff. Like I've seen giveaways come from it. They've done collabs. And what's so cool, it's like, that's the place, right? Just make a space. It's founded by everyone, not me.
Yep.
We are all building our brand. Let's build this very I don't accept sponsorship. I don't that. I spend my own money. I don't, this is just a loss for me, but it's a gain from what I feel the industry is getting by bringing these founders together.
Yeah, totally. And I think, for me, the other thing that's really valuable out of it is the learnings, right? So you talk to these people and you're like, hey, how are you doing this? It's pretty fascinating as a concept. Just be like, here's a list of questions I have for Akash. Yeah. And I start with the things I want to know. These are the things I want to know. So I love that part of it too.
And they're willing to help. I just now messaged Sarah for her VM person and she sent it to me, and my sister is like, oh my God, this person I've always wanted, amazing. You can just reach out. You don't know what you'll get and people will help you. So I think that's been really, really exciting, is just seeing how collaborative people really are. It's easy to say in paper, right? And people might pretend to be, but they really are. And even if they're not, you make the space, they'll become it.
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing about it. I've seen people that I actually felt they want that collaborative, and I had that inklings. 6 months later, I'm like, no, that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
So I never make a judgment on anyone anymore. there's not one founder that I'm disappointed in. I've recorded over 200 and something founders.
Yeah.
And that's a big statement to make. There are founders I initially thought I felt the vibe at the beginning, or they didn't reply to my DMs. Maybe they felt they were too big of a brand. It happens. But then you give them that space. Just be patient with it. They'll surprise you.
It's kind of shocking there are that many beauty founders in general. So let's talk a little bit about, I think during that moment you said workout, travel, podcast, this and the other thing. So I've always personally marveled at just how efficient you are, right? So I think that just the pure volume of projects you're getting done at a very high quality rate, it's really impressive. So talk about, how do you plan your day? When you're thinking about your day, how many days a week are you working? How do you organize yourself?
It's great from an outsider perspective. It looks really good. Like in my head, I'm thinking I'm doing it all wrong, but like I think it's just that's just probably me and my I always.
Well, that's part of the reason you are efficient, right? You're constantly thinking about how to get better.
I think as I'm getting older as well, I think my goals are getting a bit less ambitious, a bit more calmer. I don't need to like prove myself to myself anymore. You know, that kind of stuff, or to people. So I think I'm getting better because I'm now strategically doubling down like on what's important and shedding certain things. But let's say just top line, like how I generally shape and get things done. I definitely am someone who gets excited by newness and new ideas. So I always make extra time for that. So that's usually where I do it. Like, let's say on my bed at night until 3 a.m., I'll like work on a deck on something new. But I know to compartmentalize those newness isn't work time. That isn't main core time.
Yeah.
I did this always at Dior. Like one of the things I did, I made a weekly meeting with my GM and I was always presenting new things. So I managed to like carve this meeting. That's how I got all these like Dior beauty lovers and all this Dior Insiders affiliate program. I built this because it wasn't in my remit, but I had these new ideas. But I built them out of office hours. So that's something I still do today in my office. I do it as a little quotation thing, but like I don't do new ideas in my core time. So
interesting.
That is important because I can prioritize that. I think one thing I've definitely learned about myself is I need a form of physical or stimulation. So doing a workout to start the day usually is imperative. Mm-hmm. I'm not always that good at it, so I call them intentions. I haven't been in the last 3 days, and when I look in the last 3 days, that's like my fail in the last 3 days is I haven't given myself that time for even like a 10-minute stretch or something. And so I'm not perfect at it, like I'm working on that, but it is something I know I value. I do a thing where I write a to-do list every day in paper, and I make it really realistic. I think that's just years of practicing, like knowing what is my to-do list, and I don't finish a day without finishing it. So I scrunch it up and I throw it away. I do it in person, like in writing. That has been really helpful because I think just making sure all these ideas are compartmentalized with clear goals for that day, that has helped me a lot. And then the last thing, which I think the most important, is investing in the right team. I can't do all this stuff without my team behind it, right? Yep. So an assistant, I have an executive assistant now, and that's been game changing for me. And it's been really hard because I've had to like say, oh my God, I should be emailing, but I know if I was putting myself in there, I don't reply. It's on my back burner of things. So I think having the right team and maybe an assistant, if you're someone who does a lot, will really change a lot for sure. Yeah.
Starting with the to-do list, I can't remember there's some quote on it, but basically like the biggest life hack is just start the day, write down what's most important that day, and then do it, right? In order of most importance. Yeah. If you don't finish, you start with that list at the top of the next day, right? And it sounds really simple, but I think a lot of people, and I find when I'm spinning or not making the progress I want, it's when I'm just doing whatever's coming into my inbox or whatever's getting on the calendar, and I'm not intentionally choosing these are the things that I want to invest in,
exactly.
Right?
But I did this test the other day. I'm like, I feel I have ADHD. Like, this is something that my brain goes so fast. I have 100 ideas. So, and like, it's one of those things I'm like, I do, right? Like, I definitely have it. But then I'm like, I don't know. But anyway, so I'm 99% sure I have it. And I think that's where I get days where my head is so headachy. Like, there's so many ideas. And that's why I love to go on that newness, because that's the most exciting thing for me. That's why I do compartmentalize that. Like, you're earning that later. You're not doing that now. You're doing it way later. You're doing it like when you're in bed on your laptop. You do it then. Now you're doing what's important. And I think that's where the to-do list just makes my brain a little bit less fogged. And I need to do it on paper because I'm so sick of screens all the time.
Totally.
And I think something about paper and throwing it away physically, like in the dustbin, it's done, is so satisfying. So I have on my desk a to-do list, but it's so bad. I've even got a to-do list now for my assistant, but it's important, right? Like that's an extension of me. Yeah. So I like will say, hey, these are things I need to do, but maybe you can do them. Do you mind like seeing what's feasible? And I think eventually doing it for your team, like not micromanaging, like we're not saying that here. I'm saying like, okay, like I need to do all these things in the day. Actually, this is for me, but this is for my team. That is really good. And I think it keeps you accountable. It makes you have a clear task to do that day.
Yeah. I do something similar. So I do it in 3-month increments. So I have a book. I found one of these books. You kind of write out, like, these are the 4 things I'm going to work on for the next 12 weeks, right? And this is what I'm really going to focus on. And then each day you write, like, okay, these are the 2 or 3 things I did towards this particular goal. It's a little inflexible in that you could get like 8 weeks in and be like, I'm kind of done with this. But generally, it's super impactful for me. And I have now... Their books aren't even in print anymore, but I bought every single one that's like not in print. I've got a shelf of 50 of them, and I've done like 25 of them. I've been doing it since the beginning of the company.
That's cool.
3-month increments, so 12 weeks. It's only a Monday through Friday thing, so you don't do it on the weekends.
And what do you do? Like when you say 3 months, is it like you're preparing your next 3 months in this book?
No, it'd be like, okay, so...
Oh, it's a book that you get rid of after 3 months.
Yeah.
God.
So yeah. So that's the way it works.
That's actually really good.
That works. It's a good one. But I mean, again, simply just writing down what's important and then doing it, I think is the big hack.
Important, yeah.
So I've never done the executive assistant thing, but you think that's a good
It's
investment?
really, really helpful. I think, she does a little bit of my personal stuff too. So it's not purely like, I think executive is just like a nicer title for everyone. I find it weird, but like actually it was my friend, Patricia Bright, who is an incredible YouTuber and influencer and content creator. And she basically told me, like, with her assistant, listen, yes, this person can be a right hand for a big project, but also will get you coffee in the morning. Like, that is okay. Yeah. So I actually, when I was doing my interview, I was like, this is so weird, but like, are you okay? Like, if I say, get me an oat mocha in the morning on my desk? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. What I realized is things that you would do for yourself if you're so busy. Yeah. Find ways to like have that support with your team around you that are willing to do that. So you can focus your energies on building. And I think that's honestly been like so life-changing. And then they start understanding your way of working and makes it even better. Like, for example, Carlotta will go in my diary and cancel things ahead of me cancelling it and be like, listen, I know you're tired today. You've had 4 meetings. I've just went ahead and cancelled it for you. You don't need to rest. And I'm like, okay, you're right.
Good call.
Like, thank you. Yeah, I needed that.
Is she virtual or in person?
In person.
Yeah.
In person. And it's hard to find a good assistant. Yeah. And you want to test before you give them the full keys to your life. My general manager, Dio, always said test people 3 times before you let them in. So there will be some hiccups. There's things not as always worked out. But you know what's really excited me? We've got to that point where like she's telling me now, like, okay, in 10 years time, what are we doing? Or she's thinking so long term. Yeah. That makes me so happy because I'm also now building it like she's part of the family. Like, I'm doing everything for her.
Well, you're thinking long term with her too,
exactly.
Right?
And realizing an assistant is an extension of you, right? Yeah. So I think that's helped me realize like how I utilize assistant to the best. You empower them as if I was going to do the work. Would I enjoy it? So of course I have to give her projects that she can get her hands on and get really excited by and completely own. And I might want to do that. I might be like, oh, that's such a fun thing for me to do. Like, I want to go and handle that project. But I think my dad has been my biggest inspiration from that. Like, he's got hundreds of plus of employees, big company. And I thought to myself, this is a test now for Fable Mane. Eventually I might have a conglomerate, I might have multiple business, I might have new ventures, but I need to still keep everything tagging along. I can't close one thing and not the other. You need to delegate.
Let's talk about your dad for a second before we'll do one fun kind of end of show question. This is going by so fast, it's crazy. So your dad, very successful fragrance distributor and manufacturer. First, what are some of the things that you've learned from him? And then second, I think the thing that's really interesting for you with Fable Mane is you don't necessarily have an urgency to sell the brand. You can think really long term. And so what are the ambitions for the company? And then how has he influenced those ambitions, as well as your sister, who you co-founded the brand with?
Definitely. I think so. Whatever I say now kind of mimics what me and my sister think because we're really unified on our vision for the company long term and how our dad's involvement is. So Dad, just to paint that picture, he came from Uganda, Idi Amin time. So I think when he was like 13, 12, in 1972, I think, or something, all Indians, South Asians, were kicked out of Uganda. Everything was seized. So my dad had like a big house, car, everything that was taken. So they literally, in the airport, their luggages were open, right? So when I say 50 pounds in their pocket, it literally is that. So they had a few options to go to India, but UK opened up as a refugee place. So then my dad went there, and then 3 brothers and a sister and parents went into like a refugee home. They shared like 1 bed, and it was like a struggle. And then, my dad had this culture shock of being like bullied, a lot of racism. He went to university in Portsmouth and, the only person of color. So it was a big struggle and shift from what he knew. He built his fragrance, I call it empire now. It's always fun to say. Because he went to on Calais in the border of France and England overnight in a lorry, stayed the night and started buying fragrances like a secondary distributor and selling it in Wembley in the market on the floor, like on the street. And from that, he built a very big company today. What's been really interesting is he built it from his hands, built his reputation with these L'Oreal, Coty's, P&G's, started becoming a secondary distributor. So they started trusting him to like manage the secondary market, not the primary market. So secondary market, for anyone listening, is sort of like you're not direct retailers, but you want to also control, because you don't want it to be like on a bottom shelf 17% off and it ruins your Sephora distribution, for example. And then over time, he started buying brands because there's big conglomerates who are like, hey, we're selling this license. Do you want to buy it? Or he started making licenses. So he does from the Ariana Grande, Jennifer Lopez to Playboy and Formula One, these big license fragrances names he's made and has. So I think what's been really interesting is he's in all of that. But I've sort of been trained my own corporate way, and he's never influenced me. Like, it's so odd. Like, you could think this is like written in a book, but like he did electrical engineering, I did electrical engineering. He did beauty and I'm in beauty, but he never once said like, you need to do this. This is your path. So I don't know why I somehow was inspired by everything. It is a very different model today, what I'm building. Like, this is a brand building. This isn't distribution, right?
Yeah.
So Dad might focus more on profit, and those licenses have a year, lifetime. Mine is brand building, no plan to necessarily exit anytime soon, and really focusing not on profit necessarily, but evaluation, right? And like EBIT and stuff.
Growth.
So for me, that is really important, that I listen, but don't listen too much. He's actually listened to me more. He's like, okay, I need to learn how to like social media, TikTok and influence and brand build. Like, so he's like coming to me for help. There is going to be a future, I think, where I'll like, not out of expectation, but out of want, find a way to take over what he's got, diffuse it into what I want to build, and I have some ideas with going back to distribution. I don't think I want to be an incubator building brands. There's too many brands out there. I think I can really help distributing brands globally into the right way, into the right places. And there's something I want to eventually take over and work with what he's doing, but build my case study in Fable, my know-how. And one thing I am for sure is what I do is all about purpose. I'm very fortunate that I haven't necessarily needed to focus too much on profit, because I have an amazing father who's built an incredible life for me. And mum, of course, I'm not just saying my dad, my parents. But my purpose is really with helping India, Africa, wildlife, humans, conflict, and really just working on nature and the planet. So if I ever sell in the future, in 10 years, whatever, like I think majority of our exit and funds will go to our own charity. Me and my sister are building our fund. So it's sort of like a Patagonia story. I don't want to put it in my pocket. I think it needs to go back in the planet.
Very cool.
So that's
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's do just one fun end of show question.
Perfect.
So you and I have talked a lot over the years, and we've talked a lot about business, social media, etc. I don't think we've ever talked about fun, which is kind of surprising, right? Which, and for me, my wife thinks I'm crazy. But I'm like, I don't know, business is fun. It's kind of a game. It's competitive. You got this whole thing. But I'd love to know, this is actually the first time I've ever asked this question on the podcast. What is something that you do for fun that's totally unrelated from business?
For some people probably hate this stuff, but I do two things. I do escape rooms. I've done over 100-something escape rooms. I'm obsessed with escape rooms. I would even do them alone, but they often don't allow you to do them alone. So I have to like lie and pretend. I think I've done one on my own, which is, I think that's maybe a bit mucked up, but I love it. And I'm so bad. Like even my team, like my poor general manager from Barcelona in New York when we came like a few months ago. Bearing in mind, I made them when they landed at 11 p.m. do an escape room. Bearing in mind that's like 6 hours ahead of Barcelona. So she's like 5 a.m. forced to do an escape room. And it was a Jurassic Park themed one. It was fantastic. They hated it, but I loved it. So escape room, and my tactic is just pay for the room and then people have to come. So that's my way to bribe people into escape rooms. It's like, I got it. It's on me. But I just need people, because I need people to come in the room. But I don't want them to operate. I'm like, if you're not good, like stay in the corner. Like don't get in the way. So escape rooms is my number one. And then puzzles. I do puzzles. I have this app called
Both
Puzzle
puzzles,
Page.
really. Yeah.
Actually, both puzzles. So it's basically the same thing. But I have a physical book and an app, and I do pretty much every morning like 20 minutes of puzzles.
Interesting. When you say puzzles, do you mean like you put the pieces together?
Oh
to
no!
make a picture?
So this puzzle page is incredible. You have like things from Sudoku to crosswords to all these different types of, and a lot of like Japanese and Indian puzzles from back in the day. Like can't really say the names of half of them, but I know them. So yeah, that's what I do.
Very cool. I've not done 100 plus.
What do you do?
No. We don't have time for all that.
That's when I come. When you come on my podcast, I got to ask you this question.
Yeah, no, but on the escape room side of things, there's a really good one in San Francisco you should go to. I've been to. It's pretty cool. And there's another one that we did in LA that was a virtual escape room that was quite interesting. So you put on like a VR headset.
I love those
It's
ones.
all blacked out, and then like you're
really
kind of
immersed.
going through it. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
My goal is to do not every single escape room in the world, but like in most countries, escape rooms. So that's my goal. go.
I'll give you an answer on the what do I do for fun. So I got asked this question by an Uber driver in LA, and we're going through the hills. And I never really thought about it, right? I just do what you do day to day. And I was like, well, there's kind of three things I like. One, I do actually like business. And I kind of view it like a competition. I don't know why. It's just the highest stakes game you can play, right? There's infinite competitors. The stakes are high. It's meaningful, etc. The second one is I love both playing and watching sports. So whether it's football, baseball, basketball, whatever. And then the third is I really like games, whether it's a board game or a computer game or any kind of game. Yeah. And really competition kind of runs through all of them, as you'll find. So that's kind of what I do for fun.
That's so interesting. Yeah. What I love is you find that synergy. And I think that can maybe open up new things where it's linked to that synergetic feel, right? Like competitions are in a lot of different forms. It's a very friendly competition, which I think is nice. It's lighthearted.
Yeah.
I think that's the same. I think that's what I like. I like a challenge, you know?
Yeah. I have gotten pretty aggressive in games too, though.
Yeah,
I think
it can happen. I think it takes a lot of breath work to calm yourself down in those moments. And you've got to learn who to play with and who not to. I can't play with my sister. She's a sore loser. She'll leave the game halfway when you're about to win, so you never will win. And that's the worst.
My favorite was I had a friend. This was back when I was in high school, and he's like, "Hey, you should come play Monopoly with my family." And I'm sure you know Monopoly. Yeah. It's very aggressive, right? Particularly at the end. And he's like, "Only things are, one, it's really aggressive. So people are screaming at each other during the game." And I'm like, love that. Into that. Yeah. And he's number two, we're very religious, so there's no swearing. So it's screaming at each other, but with
I mean, I come to them saying no, what the hell? But I know where, I get it. That's tough.
It was one of the most unique.
Because you've got to be really, especially if it's heated, you say these words and you're like, oh my God, I have to think about what I want to say. But I can't. I want to say what's in my heart. Catan has the same effect. If you play Catan with and you play with people and they're really attacking you, I think games where you can get purposely attacked, it can get really personal.
Oh, absolutely.
You can be I don't want to talk to you anymore for a while. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, there you go.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so glad we got to do this. This was fun to do it in person while you were out here. And thanks for taking the time out. And I'm sure Fable Mane's going to continue to kill it. And so congrats on that.
Thanks, Conor. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Bye, Akash.
Bye.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by Creator IQ. Creator IQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at creatoriq.com.